Prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the depths of fear with our latest survival horror tale. Set within the haunted walls of an old American high school, this story follows three friends, Jake, Max, and Lucia, as they uncover the terrifying secrets lurking in their school. When they decide to investigate the eerie legends that have plagued the school for decades, they find themselves trapped in a nightmare that defies reality. Dive into this gripping narrative that blurs the line between the living and the spectral, where every whisper in the dark holds a sinister secret. Join us as we explore a harrowing tale of survival, where escaping the nightmare is just the beginning.
The cold, metallic sound of the school bell echoed through the empty halls, reverberating off the lockers and creating an eerie symphony that set my nerves on edge. It was early, far too early for anyone else to be here. Yet here we were, Jake, Max, and Lucia, gathered outside the old auditorium, our breaths visible in the chilly morning air. This place had always given me the creeps, even in broad daylight. Built in the early 1900s, the school was rumored to be haunted, but we had laughed off the stories as silly legends. That is, until that fateful morning. We had heard whispers of strange occurrences and decided, out of a mix of curiosity and bravado, to explore the school before classes started. "Why are we here so early again?" Max asked, rubbing his eyes, his voice barely masking his apprehension. "Couldn't this have waited until after school?" Lucia shushed him, glancing around nervously. "Because we need to know if the stories are true. It's now or never." Her determination was palpable, but so was her fear. We were united in our quest for answers, even if it meant facing our deepest fears. We entered the auditorium, the creaking door protesting our intrusion with a long, mournful groan. Dust motes danced in the shafts of early morning light that pierced the gloom, casting an otherworldly glow on the decaying seats and peeling walls. The smell of mildew and something else, something metallic, hung in the air, a scent that made my stomach churn. The first sign that something was wrong came almost immediately. As we approached the stage, the temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath misting in the air, and a shiver ran down my spine. Lucia hugged herself, her eyes wide with trepidation. "This place gives me the creeps," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Max, always the skeptic, scoffed. "It's just old. Old buildings are drafty." But even he couldn't hide the unease in his eyes. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from backstage, the sound reverberating through the cavernous room. We all jumped, and my heart started pounding. We exchanged nervous glances, then, in silent agreement, crept towards the source of the noise. The backstage area was a maze of old props and forgotten costumes, covered in decades of dust. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. That's when we saw it. A large, old mirror, cracked and tarnished with age, propped against the wall. It was too big to have fallen on its own. Someone or something had moved it. "Do you see that?" Max whispered, his voice shaking. I followed his gaze to the reflection in the mirror. Our own faces stared back, but there was something wrong. Our reflections were smiling, wide, unnatural grins that stretched across their faces. We were not smiling. Lucia screamed, and the reflections' mouths moved in perfect sync with her, their grins widening even further. Panic surged through me, and we turned to run. But the door we had entered through was gone. In its place was a solid wall. We were trapped. "What's happening?" Max yelled, pounding on the wall in desperation. His voice echoed back at us, the only answer to our frantic question. "I don't know." I shouted back, my own fear threatening to overwhelm me. "But we need to find another way out." We stumbled through the darkness, our flashlight beams flickering as if the batteries were dying. Every corner we turned seemed to lead us deeper into the labyrinth of backstage rooms and corridors. The sense of being watched was overpowering, a constant pressure that made my skin crawl. That's when we heard the whispering. At first, it was faint, barely audible over our own frantic breathing. But it grew louder, a chorus of hushed voices echoing through the halls. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was menacing, filled with malice. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in on us, suffocating us with their secrets. Lucia grabbed my arm, her grip painfully tight. "Jake, we need to stick together. Whatever happens, we can't split up." Her eyes were wide with terror, her usual calm shattered. Max nodded in agreement, his earlier bravado completely gone. "We need a plan. Maybe if we find the source of the whispering, we can find a way out." His voice was shaky, but there was a resolve there that matched my own. With no better option, we followed the voices, our footsteps echoing ominously. The air grew colder, the whispers more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all around us, pressing in, suffocating. It felt like we were walking through a nightmare, every shadow and sound amplified by our fear. Finally, we reached a large, circular room at the center of the labyrinth. In the middle stood a pedestal, and on it, an old, leather-bound book. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of madness. Lucia stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the book as if in a trance. "Don't touch it," I warned, but it was too late. Her fingers brushed the cover, and the room erupted in a blinding light, searing my vision and filling my head with a high-pitched ringing. When the light faded, we were no longer in the school. We stood in a dark forest, the trees twisted and gnarled, their branches clawing at the sky. The air was thick with fog, and the whispers had turned into chilling laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Where are we?" Max asked, his voice barely a whisper. The forest was like something out of a nightmare, every detail warped and wrong. Lucia looked around, her face pale. "I don't know, but I don't think we're in our world anymore." Her voice trembled, and I could see the fear in her eyes. We started walking, hoping to find a way back. The forest seemed to go on forever, each step taking us deeper into its dark heart. Shadows moved in the fog, just beyond our vision, and the laughter followed us, taunting, always just out of reach. The ground beneath our feet was soft, almost like walking on a sponge, and the trees seemed to whisper as we passed. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time had no meaning in this place. We were exhausted, hungry, and scared. Every noise made us jump, and the feeling of being watched never left us. Just when we thought we couldn't go any further, we stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin, its windows dark and uninviting. We hesitated, but with nowhere else to go, we decided to take shelter. The cabin was empty, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. We huddled together, trying to stay awake, but exhaustion finally took over. The darkness closed in around us, and sleep claimed us despite our fear. I woke to the sound of crying. Lucia was gone. I shook Max awake, and we frantically searched the cabin. The door was still barred from the inside, but there was no sign of her. Panic surged through me as I called out her name, my voice echoing hollowly in the dark. "Lucia." I shouted into the night, but there was no answer. The forest seemed to close in on us, the trees leaning closer as if they were alive. Max and I stumbled back into the forest, calling her name. The laughter had returned, louder and more mocking. Desperate, we followed the sound, hoping it would lead us to her. The fog thickened, and the trees seemed to close in, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for us. That's when we found the clearing. Lucia stood in the center, her back to us. She was speaking to someone, but there was no one there. The scene was surreal, her voice carrying a note of despair that chilled me to the bone. "Lucia, what are you doing?" I asked, stepping closer, my heart pounding in my chest. She turned to face us, and I felt my blood run cold. Her eyes were empty, her face a mask of terror. "It's too late, Jake," she whispered. "We can't leave. They won't let us." Her voice was hollow, devoid of hope. Before I could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, its face obscured by a hood, and its presence radiated pure malice. It raised a hand, and Lucia collapsed, lifeless, the light leaving her eyes in an instant. "Run!" Max shouted, grabbing my arm. We fled, the figure's laughter echoing in our ears. The forest seemed to come alive, the trees twisting and shifting to block our path. We ran until we could run no more, collapsing in a heap. The forest had changed again. The trees now twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the ground felt like it was pulsing beneath us. Max looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Jake, we can't keep running. We need to find a way to fight back." His voice was filled with a desperate resolve. I nodded, determination hardening within me. "We need to find the book. Maybe it holds the key to all of this." My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Our journey took us deeper into the nightmare. We encountered more figures, each more terrifying than the last. Shadows moved at the edge of our vision, and the laughter followed us, growing louder and more mocking. But we were driven by the need to survive, to escape this hell. Finally, we found it, the book, lying in a small clearing, the whispers now a deafening roar. As I reached for it, the hooded figure appeared again, blocking our path. Its presence was suffocating, a dark shadow that seemed to absorb all light. "You can't win," it hissed, its voice filled with venom. "This is your fate." The words echoed in my mind, each one a dagger of despair. "No," I replied, steeling myself. "This is not how it ends." I reached for the book, my hand shaking. With a surge of defiance, I grabbed the book and opened it. The figure screamed, a sound that shattered the very air around us. The ground trembled, and the forest began to dissolve, the darkness receding, replaced by blinding light. We found ourselves back in the school, standing in the old auditorium. The book was gone, and so was the figure. It was over, or so we thought. Weeks passed, and life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such an ordeal. But the experience had left its mark on us. We were no longer the same carefree kids we had once been. The memory of that place haunted our dreams, and the feeling of being watched never truly left us. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard it, the whispering, soft at first, then growing louder, more insistent. I sat up, my heart pounding. Max and Lucia's voices joined the chorus, their tones filled with fear. I tried to ignore it, but the sound grew louder, more demanding. And then I heard it, a laughter, cold and mocking, echoing through my mind. It was the same laughter that had haunted us in the forest, a sound that promised nothing but despair. "Jake, it's not over." The voice was a whisper, but it carried a weight of inevitability. I looked around, but there was no one there. Yet, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The figure's voice, now inside my head, whispered its final, chilling promise. "We will meet again." The words echoed in my mind, a dark prophecy that I knew would come true. In that moment, I knew the truth. We had never escaped. The nightmare was just beginning, and as I lay there, the laughter growing louder, I realized that some stories have no end.
As you reflect on the eerie journey through the haunted halls of the old high school, remember the harrowing experiences of Jake, Max, and Lucia. Have you ever felt an unexplained chill or heard whispers in the darkness that sent shivers down your spine? If you want to see another story, we've selected this video about the mysteries of Hollow Creek and it's appearing on your screen now. Remember to subscribe for more spine-chilling story. If you find yourself drawn to the unknown, be prepared. Not all tales have a happy ending. Share your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. Until next time, stay vigilant and stay brave, because the darkness is always watching.